There are moments when power forgets what it is meant to serve. Moments when a name, a title, or a last name whispered in marble hallways begins to feel heavier than the law itself. And then there are moments when that illusion shatters in real time, under fluorescent courtroom lights, with nowhere left to hide. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to see how far this conversation is reaching. The story begins long before a gavel strikes wood. It begins with raised voices in a crowded restaurant, with a newspaper folded beside a plate, with a disagreement that should have ended as so many do, quietly, unresolved, and forgotten by strangers who will never meet again. Instead, it followed everyone involved into history. 3 days earlier, in Washington, D.C., lunchtime had settled into its familiar rhythm. Conversations overlapped, silverware clinked, staff moved briskly between tables filled with political aides, tourists, and longtime residents who had learned to coexist with the gravity of the capital. At one table sat a man nearing 70, posture worn but steady, the quiet presence of someone who had seen more than he ever spoke about. He read the paper slowly, absorbing an article about a Senate vote that stirred something deep in him. Across the room sat a young woman whose confidence entered the restaurant before she did. Her posture carried certainty, not earned, but inherited. Her tone carried authority, not from experience, but from proximity to it. When she overheard the comment he made to his companion, something inside her tightened. Words were exchanged. They did not need to be loud. They did not need to be cruel. They only needed to challenge power. The young woman stood. What happened next would not be debated in whispers. It would be replayed on screens. It would be slowed down, analyzed, paused. It would follow her into a courtroom where names and titles no longer mattered. By the time the case reached Providence Municipal Court, the atmosphere was already thick with anticipation. Word had traveled quickly, not because of the assault alone, but because of who she was. Ashley Elizabeth Morgan, 23 years old, entered the courtroom as if stepping into a familiar arena. Her clothing was precise, deliberate, curated for authority. A small flag pin caught the light. A leather portfolio rested against her arm, embossed with a seal that did not belong to her but had always opened doors. Behind her sat a legal team accustomed to congressional corridors and closed-door meetings. Her mother sat upright, polished, composed, as if public image were muscle memory. Judge Frank Caprio watched without interrupting. He noticed everything. The portfolio, the posture, the quiet assumption that this room, like so many others, would bend. The bailiff called the case. The charge was simple: assault and battery on an elderly individual. Simple, but not small. Ashley stood when asked to plead. Her voice did not shake. It had been rehearsed, controlled, confident in a way that suggested she believed the outcome had already been decided somewhere else. She entered a plea of not guilty. Then she raised her objection. She did not speak of remorse. She did not speak of misunderstanding. She spoke of the Constitution. Her words fell into the room like a challenge. She referenced Article 1, Section 6. She spoke of legislative protection, of privilege during session, of travel to and from the Capitol. She framed her arrest as a violation not of her rights, but of the Republic itself. Judge Caprio did not interrupt her. He let her speak until she ran out of certainty. When he finally responded, his tone was measured, almost gentle. He asked her to explain how a clause written to protect lawmakers applied to her. Ashley opened her portfolio and produced a printed constitution, marked and tabbed. She recited language with precision. She spoke of interpretation, of intent, of advice she had received from people who understood power better than anyone else. She said the protection extended to family members. The courtroom shifted. Judge Caprio removed his glasses slowly, not in disbelief, but in recognition. He asked a single question that cut through everything she had said. How does an assault in a restaurant become travel to the Capitol? Ashley answered without hesitation. The restaurant, she said, was on the route. Her lunch was incidental. Her destination was the Senate. The words hung there, suspended between audacity and belief. Judge Caprio turned his attention away from her and called the victim forward. Thomas Sullivan stood with effort, age evident not in weakness, but in accumulated weight. One arm rested in a sling. His voice, when he spoke, carried the calm of someone who had learned long ago that shouting does not make truth louder. He spoke of service, of years spent overseas, of a country he believed in enough to criticize. He spoke of a comment made quietly, of a response that escalated, of pain that arrived without warning. He did not exaggerate, he did not dramatize, he simply told the truth. Ashley interrupted him. She framed his words as provocation. She framed criticism as harassment. She framed herself as a target. Judge Caprio stopped her. He reminded the room that criticism of elected officials was not only protected, it was essential. Security footage was requested. Ashley objected. She spoke of danger, of exposure, of risk to her father. Judge Caprio denied the objection. The video played. It told a story no argument could undo. It showed a man seated. It showed a woman approaching. It showed gestures growing sharper. It showed a sudden movement that left no room for interpretation. It showed her leaving without looking back. When the screen went dark, the silence was absolute. Ashley spoke again. She described fear. She described training. She described instinct. The prosecution responded with evidence that her actions reflected instruction, not panic. Judge Caprio listened. Then he spoke. He clarified the law. He explained that legislative protection belonged to legislators alone, that it did not travel through bloodlines, that it did not excuse violence, that it did not shield anyone from accountability. Ashley produced another document, a memorandum. She said it came from her father's office. The room changed. Judge Caprio asked who prepared it. She said it was legal advice. He asked if her father authorized it. She said her family had been advised. Judge Caprio made a decision that no one expected and everyone would remember. He ordered a call, not to a lawyer, not to a staffer, to Senate leadership. Ashley objected. Her attorney stood. The courtroom felt suddenly smaller. Judge Caprio explained his reasoning calmly. If she claimed protection during session, then session would be confirmed. The call connected. A voice answered, professional, controlled, carrying the unmistakable acoustics of a chamber where history was being recorded. The Senate was voting. Judge Caprio explained the situation. There was a pause. Then came clarity. The claim was false. The memorandum, if it existed, was improper. Ashley's face drained of color. Judge Caprio asked for her father. There was hesitation on the line. Then movement. Then a new voice, strained and confused. The senator did not understand what he was hearing. Judge Caprio explained again. The words landed harder this time. The senator's response unfolded in real time, not as a politician, but as a parent watching consequences arrive faster than he could stop them. He denied authorizing any memo. He acknowledged the law. He recognized the damage. The chamber on the other end went quiet. The senator spoke words that would echo far beyond the courtroom. He said his daughter had no protection. He said she must face consequences. He said he could not continue in his role. When the call ended, the silence was no longer tense. It was heavy. Ashley sat shaking, not from fear of punishment, but from the realization that the shield she had relied on no longer existed. Judge Caprio delivered the sentence without anger. It was firm. It was measured. It was rooted in accountability. Time would pass. Consequences would unfold. Careers would end. Lessons would remain. Months later, when the noise had faded, Ashley would stand before the man she harmed, not as a senator's daughter, not as a symbol, but as a person forced to confront the weight of her actions. He would remind her of something simple and enduring. Democracy is not fragile because people speak. It is fragile when they are told they cannot. Justice does not ask who your father is. It asks who you chose to be. If this story made you think, question, or reflect on power and accountability, subscribe and stay with us for more moments where the law speaks louder than privilege.